I'm Spiros Xanthos. I'm one of the founders of Resolve. I'm the CEO, and I'm very excited for the topic. I'll start by sharing my own experience. I think my own life, both personally and professionally, has dramatically changed. Obviously, I feel grateful and lucky to be in San Francisco at this time of technology evolution. I think both the way we use personal technology or professionally is dramatically changing. I wasn't here in the dot-com bubble, but this is much faster than anything I've seen in my own lifetime, right? And especially since ChatGPT got released, things have accelerated dramatically. And there was probably even a question maybe like a few months ago, is, let's say, AI slowing down? And actually, I think it's accelerating. And in my opinion, we're on an exponential curve. And sometimes that's difficult to even comprehend, right, for how things are gonna evolve. But I guess one thing that maybe has not changed is we're still on call for machines. And that's kind of the goal of Resolve. How can we change that? And how can we have essentially AI maybe do the work for us, especially the type of work that is tedious and toil and stressful. Maybe I'll start by sharing a bit about kind of my background and why actually I decided to work on this, because maybe it's good context for today's discussion. I've been building dev tools and observability tools all my career. I dropped out of my PhD to start a log analytics tool called LogInsight that were acquired by VMware. And then I worked on OpenTelemetry, did also a distributed tracing platform in a company called Omnition, who ended up getting acquired by Splunk. And then, at Splunk, I was running Splunk Observability, which was, a big, production system with a lot of engineers working on it. And, the thing that, probably was the most difficult in doing that was that, obviously, our customers relied on us to run their own systems. So what in practice happened, we spent the vast majority of our time, in engineering, actually running and maintaining the system. A lot more than, we spend on actually building it. And that was a necessity because obviously, unless we run the system reliably, nobody would use it. And, as, let's say, the GM of observability, the only times I was on a, let's say, critical customer meeting was because of an outage that, got escalated, let's say, to the CEO of Splunk, and then I had to be there to apologize and explain how we're gonna do things better. And the other, event that happened is, at some point, it became so hard to keep the system running that over a 6-month period, we lost 90% of our SRE team because they were all burned out. And these things kind of are some of the experience that led us in working on Resolve and trying to solve some of these problems better. Now, I guess software engineering is maybe these two circles of between building and running. And that's especially true, obviously, in recent years, where most of the software has become a service, let's say, right? But at scale, what at least I have experienced is that, especially when the system becomes more complex and when you have a lot of users and high reliability requirements, you end up actually spending a lot more of the engineering time, let's say, engineering and operations time in running the production system rather than building. And obviously, all of us, every CTO or everybody who kind of runs a team like this, obviously would like for the team to spend more time in building rather than running. But that's actually the reality. And what I work with a lot of engineering teams these days, and what we found is there are a few reasons, obviously, why that happens at scale, right? First of all, modern systems, especially in the cloud, are highly complex. Especially if you're in an environment you're maybe running on Kubernetes and you have microservices, you end up having a highly dynamic, highly complex system that changes a lot, right? And also, what happens also is no individual human can comprehend or know the entire system, right? So it becomes very difficult when something goes wrong or you want to perform a task, and oftentimes becomes like a team activity or an escalation because there is not one person that can do it. And further, one thing that I hear often is that the best, most knowledgeable, let's say maybe engineers, end up the ones in firefighting mode all the time because they're the ones who know the entire system best. The other thing that contributes to this, obviously, is the fragmentation of data and the tooling that we have, right? So, I'm sure most of your environments look like this, right? Where you have, let's say, obviously, a lot of cloud services, cloud infrastructure, code, telemetry split oftentimes in multiple tools. And many of these tools were also not designed to work together, right? The idea is that, as a user, you use the tool and it's effective in what it does, but oftentimes you have to connect data across multiple silos. And this is like a very heavy human exercise, right? Because all the reasoning and all the, let's say, the decision-making and the insights have to come from humans that they rely on their own experience, the knowledge of these tools, et cetera. And this is probably even worse for, most things. Like if you're an SRE, let's say, or maybe you work in infrastructure, probably you use these tools every day. But let's say an on-call engineer that is on call maybe every 8 weeks, obviously they're not also experts in these tools, right? And the desire is not to be even experts. And of course, the change is only accelerating. And this also, all of this makes it way worse. And most statistics we have actually from our customers say that at least 50% of any incident is usually caused by some sort of a change, right? Now, of course, the solution is not to slow down changes, but find better ways to, let's say, trust that as we move fast or maybe moving even faster, things are not going to break. Another actual experience I had at Splunk is we would pause all code changes from Black Friday to until New Year's because a lot of our customers were in e-commerce, and we couldn't afford any downtime during that period. But of course, that was a huge cost to our velocity, right? And I don't think that's the solution that people want. Now, the way we also build software is changing, right? Obviously, we started with things like GitHub Copilot, where you mostly had, let's say, code completion and a better autocomplete maybe. But things are changing very, very quickly, right? We moved to agentic coding, and also now we moved even to background agents that can pick up an issue, let's say, from GitHub and go work on it for a while and solve it, right? So obviously, this is getting almost universal adoption, and I don't think things are slowing down. In fact, they're accelerating on that front as well. But what that means, actually, right? In my opinion, it becomes probably even harder to some degree to now have a production system that is not just written, let's say, by humans, but a big part of the code is now generated by agents and tools. And obviously, that's a great thing, right? Like, nobody wants to slow that down or stop that. But the question is, how do we move faster, right? And can we move faster in reality if we don't address both, let's say, the building and the running? And of course, nobody wants to be paid for code that an agent wrote. But in practice, I think this is a serious issue, right? And I think that I talked to a lot of CTOs, right? Maybe I'll share a couple stories, right? Like I was speaking with somebody who is the CTO of actually a public company, user of Resolve, and I was trying to understand, okay, how important is this problem, right? So I asked, okay, Nick, what do you think? How important is this problem to you, right? And it's like, listen, if I were to design a system today for my team, it would be something like Resolve, or let's say an agent that helps with production. And I'm like, why is that? It's like because our MTTR is not good, and that is because the way we respond to alerts and incidents is very inconsistent. Oftentimes we have new people, or the team is growing fast, like not everybody knows the tools. So I would like something that can at least help the team be much more consistent in how we respond to things, right? But then he said, like, that's not all. The other thing that's happening is, my engineering pool is fixed, and obviously we want to move very, very fast. So any productivity gains from this, right? Any work that can be alleviated by AI, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to fire people. In fact, I'm going to have them work on things that can produce more revenue, right? And this is not unusual. I hear this from many, many CTOs out there that are working on this. And obviously, for the same reason, let's say that the best people are firefighting. If we don't address this well, it won't matter if you write code faster, because we're not going to be able to move faster. At least that's how I see it. And then where we are in terms of technology, in some sense, I think this statement represents kind of where we are, in my opinion, as an industry. One way even to think about it is that as a user of tools, including Resolve, including coding agents, I think that let's say when you want a problem solved in code, you can ask an agent, I would like X, Y, Z, right? You know exactly what you want to ask because you know what you want, right? And also, you know if you got back what you expected. When you're dealing with a production task or issue, especially an incident, oftentimes you don't know what question to ask. So the agents have to behave very differently, right? They need to tell you essentially what question is important to ask, and especially in a stressful situation. But beyond that, sometimes it's difficult to know if what you got back is really the answer. So the agent also has to be very diligent, let's say, in providing all the evidence, whether this is the right answer, or if there are multiple potential issues, it needs to be able to present that well, right? So I think it's a very different type of task or a very different type of agent that you need to build. And this is how we think about it at Resolve in some sense. We think that an agent to be effective in this has to understand, let's say, your complete production system, which means code, changes that come into the system, whether that's code being pushed to production or maybe configuration changes, or even like changes because of customer traffic patterns. It needs to understand telemetry, logs, metrics, traces. It needs to understand infrastructure, dependencies. And to do that, obviously, it needs to be able to learn on its own, right? It needs to be able to use tools that the humans use and learn from these tools that exist, right? Because oftentimes, a big part of what makes this hard is that these systems are not as self-documenting as code, right? There is this institutional knowledge or tribal knowledge that is spread across tools and human minds, and it needs to be able to figure that out without too much effort from users. The other thing, of course, is in these large, complex systems, an agent needs to be able to reason, right? Because oftentimes what it's dealing with is a novel task or incident, right? So it has to be able to essentially almost approach it from first principle, let's say, or deduce what's happening based on the evidence it sees, right? The way a human does. And the other thing that may be the most important, it is to learn as it works with humans, right? Ideally, what you want to happen is, over time, an agent like this becomes as knowledgeable about the systems, about, let's say, the tribal knowledge, about the tools, as any other human, so it can assist, let's say, anybody as let's say, things happen, right? So a new, let's say, developer can be on call or, be able to troubleshoot incidents, not in 6 months, that is typical today, but like in a week, like how they commit their first PR, let's say. Now, Resolve is already used in production at scale in quite a few companies. And maybe the thing to share there is, I built multiple products from zero. And I actually enjoy doing that. But Resolve was by far the most difficult because obviously AI is what enables this, but still you have to, the models are far from solving this problem on their own, right? And if you think about it, you need a combination of agents. You need an agent that understands code, really, an agent that understands logs, an agent that understands time series, an agent that understands infrastructure. And all of these have to work together in a way that obviously achieves very high reliability and truly accelerates things. And actually, Shankar here, who's the head of engineering from DataStax, who's one of our users, is going to speak in a minute. And I think the other thing that I observed happening is oftentimes, this is a very common topic I discuss actually, especially with engineering leaders. People ask, okay, what ROI do others see in the industry, right? And obviously, I think there is a strong acceleration from both, let's say, coding and agents like Resolve. But I think the other thing I observe, and maybe how people make decisions, is when people start using a tool like this, actually they become, let's say, they start depending on it in a good way, right? And the best way to know is okay, if I were to take one of these tools away, what happens, right? And what we discover internally ourselves in how we use AI is that, all of our engineers have come to be dependent now on both coding agents and Resolve and how they do their job daily, right? And, I think the world has changed. And I think any new developer really that joins, let's say, Resolve or one of the companies that use these tools, in some sense, completely relies on it from the beginning and how they do their work. And this is the CTO of Blueground saying that there's no going back now, right? On call and time-sensitive troubleshooting will ever be AI first. And I think that's really the state we're getting to. And obviously, different companies and different scales are different, but this is the end result of where we are. So what I see myself now, where are we headed? I think that this is happening very quickly, right? And I think we're already moving from, let's say, prompts to delegation, right? Instead of me asking basically a question the way I did, we see a lot more agents basically picking up tasks and doing the work for humans. And I think it's also very important for humans to learn how to do this, right? I think at an individual basis, obviously, you can be a lot more effective if you do this well. But also, I think quickly, if we don't do this well, humans might end up becoming the bottleneck to velocity in a lot of these systems, right? And my advice to individuals is obviously the faster, like they say, AI is not going to replace you, but somebody else who uses AI might replace you, right? So it's very critical, I think, at an individual level. I also think that what we see, at least with Resolve, is obviously human in the loop is critical, especially for irreversible decisions or high-impact decisions. But obviously, as the system learns, I think maybe what I see happening is much more quickly we become, I guess, comfortable with maybe an AI operating in production and making decisions than we were, faster than I expected myself, at least. And the other thing I see, and oftentimes, I ask CTOs, let's say, why do you adopt AI? Like, what is, the motivation to go all in some cases, right? And I think what I hear a lot is that if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it and end up like disrupting us big time, right? So the risk really of, being late is way, way higher than being early and, doing things that maybe not all of them work out.